P&R with Adam R. Welcome to 3P&R. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me again on this episode is Cloyd Steiger, former homicide detective. Cloyd, how you doing, sir?
We're good, thanks.
Good. We were just talking prior to podcast about the weather. Here, 80 degrees, there, 50 degrees, and a little bit of snow in an awkward time of the year.
Yeah, it's been a weird year. I mean, it was beautiful on Easter. A little cool, but beautiful sunshine. But yeah, it snowed last week, which it never does in April. Actually, it doesn't snow that much here even year round, but that was weird. It was only there on the ground for a few minutes, and then by afternoon it was gone, but still weird.
Yeah, especially in April. It's bizarre.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, in this episode, we're going to discuss more, your career, things, your highs, your lows, the things you liked most. I example it by, some of the other police I speak to off podcasts, like Brett Preston from the town of Sneed's Police Department here in Florida. You have Letty DePaul, former Secret Service, former U.S. Marshal. One thing I've learned about the present police and the former police, they don't change who they are. They are still police, right? They're still cops at heart.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not a job, it's a lifestyle.
Right.
I would say that.
And I saw this on LinkedIn today on one of the law enforcement things. It says, look, you don't join law enforcement for the money. You do it because you care, right? You care about your community. You care about people's safety, and it's needed. So let's go down to the style. So what were some of the cases in your career that, captured your interest or you found to be, I'm not going to say the word exciting because in homicide, really, it's not really all that exciting. It's more about let's catch this guy.
Yeah, it's more of a chess game than a racquetball match. But so I mean, sometimes at the end you have a couple hours of that racquetball match, but most of it is more cerebral and thinking what you can do to get the guy, and that's what you spend most of your time doing. I mean, I've worked so many cases in my career, homicide cases. I mean, I worked about 250 murders, and some of them stand out, others not so much, just because, one gangbanger kills another gangbanger. I still work it just as hard, but it doesn't have that intellectual interest in some other people.
I mean, at some point it just becomes Tuesday, right? It gets to be that often.
Yeah, exactly. The things that were hard were, my phone ringing in the middle of the night all the time, sometimes 2, 3, 4 nights in a row. And working, getting a call at, 2:00 in the morning and being at work for the next 30 hours straight. When I was a younger guy, I could handle that. That's when I was getting older. It would take me days to recover from that. So that's for the hard stuff. Not that those were all bad, because sometimes there's no better satisfying case than getting a call at 2 a.m. about a terrible murder, and you don't have any idea who the victim is, you don't have any idea who the suspect is or what happened, and then 30 hours later you're booking somebody into jail because you got a confession, and that's kind of fly by the seat of your pants work, and I really like that. You got to think outside the box. There's some people that are checklist detectives. We do this, then we do this, then we do this. You'll never get anywhere because real life doesn't follow a checklist. You have to be dynamic and think on your feet and be willing to turn 180 degrees if the evidence tells you to, and not be stuck on your working theory so much that you ignore evidence that shows something else.
Right. Yeah. It's, homicide, even though at some point you could kind of become desensitized to it, it still takes a toll on your psychology, especially when you have a family.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, I've said this over and over. I had a power take lever. There was a home mode and there was a work mode, and the two wouldn't recognize each other if they ran into each other on the street.
Right.
Because my home life's PG-13, my work life was MA-17. Right. It was just completely different. And but you do. I mean, that doesn't mean you didn't have empathy for the victims and things like that. You always try your hardest. One of the ones that always gets to everybody is when you're investigating the murder of a child, and those are always tough.
Yeah.
But you still have to disengage and just get the job done. You can't sit and, if you're there, fretting over every little thing and crying over this victim, you're not doing anybody any good. None of the victims' families, none of the other people you're not doing, or the victim themselves. You're just in the way. So you can't be that way. You have to be disengaged and focused and working on what you're working on.
Yeah. I mean, you're responsible for not just bringing closure, but bringing justice to a family. So,
right. If you screw up, there's a chance, there'll be one of these families that 30 years later didn't know what happened to their kid, and that's the worst thing that can happen to you. Well, the worst, absolute worst, is when your loved one just disappears off the face of the earth and you have no idea where they are, if they're alive or dead. And 95% of the time they're dead and don't know what happened to them. That's the worst. And then next to that is if somebody's murdered and you don't know who did it or what happened, that's worse.
Yeah.
There's no good part of having a family or friend murdered, but it's all hard, but it's different levels of hardness. And that's, like I said, those are the ones, at least if you have the case solved and the person taking responsibility for the crime, then at least you know what happened, and you'll never get over it. But it's just that one little thing you can check off on your box and be better for it.
You know what? Recently, I tried to get this guy on the podcast. I'd had an interview with him off podcast. He would not come on the podcast. He was one of these auditors, right? And he caught my attention because I saw video of him going into a public building with law enforcement. Granted, there was some exchanges that maybe favored him. At the end of the day, what the hell's he doing in that building? Does this guy not have a job? And so I asked him, I was like, listen, man, what is your goal? I got to know your goal. I can understand. I said this before. If you're pulled over or you're involved with police and you feel like something's wrong, you're having a negative interaction, by all means record it. But when you're going to these locations like police stations, you're being an antagonist at that point. You're looking for problems. And so I told this guy, or I asked him, what's your goal? He's like, well, we should defund police. And I mean, his attitude is very negative. So I asked him, what happens in your neighborhood if a group of gunmen come in there? Who are you going to call? John down the road who's a dentist? You're going to call Chris up the road who's a butcher? You're not. You're going to call the police. And, and don't be an asshole. And it's not about defunding the police. I said this before. It's increase the funds. Have a better screening process. Give them the training that would really benefit the police out in the field, like jiu-jitsu and other things that have submission holds. Because like you're asking men and women to go deal with some of the most nightmarish outcomes you could possibly think of. And they're not getting paid great. It's bizarre to me that someone would walk around with a camera like, oh, I'm here to audit. Look, again, to repeat, if you feel like you're in a bad situation, by all means record, protect yourself, get an attorney. They're paid to do this shit. But don't go looking for problems. I still can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, well, because he lives in this fantasy world, that, if we just got rid of the police and everybody would sing Kumbaya and get along. Well, look, you can see what's happening now with crime rate and violent crime spiking all over the country because criminals have the impression, and they're correct, that they can get away with a lot more. And so this is what happens. If you want to live in that kind of world, go ahead. But don't bring it to my house. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
utopia.
I looked this guy up. He's a server at a restaurant, man. His credentials don't speak audit. His credentials don't say I should be the one to overlook them. There are some auditors out there. I understand their existence, but they don't go parading around, government facilities looking for a problem. That's not their job.
No, that's exactly right.
So I don't know, man. And especially lately with these mass shootings, that scares the shit out of me, Cloyd.
Yeah. Well, all these gun laws and gun restrictions they want to do will not stop that. Matter of fact, it'll make it worse because the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And I said that my whole career because I've investigated several mass shootings, and I've also investigated would have been mass shootings if some civilian there hadn't been armed and stopped it. So that's the thing.
There's no store.
Don't follow the law now. They don't go to the gun store and buy a gun. They don't care what your law says about how many rounds they can have in a magazine. They don't, because most of them are convicted felons anyway and prohibited from owning or possessing a firearm in the first place. So the only person you're hurting with all these laws are law-abiding citizens trying to protect themselves. And it's a typical government thing that some people just are so naive. They think, well, I remember one time Dianne Feinstein said, well, if we outlaw assault weapons, then all the criminals will turn theirs in because it's the right thing to do. I mean, are you seriously that stupid?
Honestly.
Are you really that stupid? And what are you doing in this position? Because apparently she was. They're not going to. It's like, the sheep and the sheepdogs, the sheep and the wolves, if you take away the sheepdogs, the wolves are going to eat the sheep. And that's what's going on. People don't understand that.
It's the truth, man. Like, this isn't like a movie where the enemies are like the bad intentioned people. There's no store out there where they're doing background checks. All right, well, you're not that bad of a villain. So we can.
These guys aren't getting their guns from that. They're stolen guns. They're running on the street.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're not. They don't. You can give people all the background checks if you want, and it's not going to stop. And the fact that we have comprehensive background. How many times have I heard that? You know what? They get comprehensive background checks right now. If you buy a rifle or something anymore, or a handgun, you got to wait 6-7 days. I got all that time to do a background check.
Right.
What are you going to do more back? What are you going to check the background again?
Yeah.
Maybe you should make sure you record any issues with the people that you think shouldn't have a gun. And the other thing that just drives me up the wall with this is there are a lot of gun felonies now for criminals using guns, and they not always, many times they just drop that felony when that would be a big enhancement, and they don't enforce the gun laws on the real criminals. And so that makes me wonder what their real objective is. It's not to stop criminals.
Agreed. Listen, guns get a lot of negative press. Let's rewind time to cavemen, right? And back when cavemen existed and they saw another caveman with a really pretty, or I guess pretty-ish girl and a good food supply, if you're a bad person, you don't need a gun. You're going to get a club and club this guy over the head, take his woman and his food,
Exactly. Yeah, you're going to do, I've been to lots of knifings, and I've been to where people are beat to death with things, hammer murders. I've been to several where people are beaten to death with hammers, and people will always find ways to do it. And, the only thing you're doing is preventing that victim from a chance to defend themselves or their family, and putting them completely at the mercy of the criminal.
And I heard someone recently say, well, why don't they get fighting training? I'm like, listen, you could train someone all you want, but if someone walks your house and he's significantly stronger, your training's it's in vain. The guy he'll beat you to death. Right?
That's a fantasy. That is an absolute fantasy that you can just put some little wrist lock on some big criminal and he's going to fall to his knees. It's not true. I had a lot of training. I was a high school and college wrestler, and I did a lot of, training on the police department and hand-to-hand stuff. And I'm a big guy. I had to struggle. It's hard. I mean, I could do it, but you have to constantly train. So this thing if you just first of all, you're going to do that if this person has a gun or a knife? No, you can't. That's the point.
Right.
It's just people are naive. First of all, people are naive that violence looks like it does on TV. Violence is ugly. It's always been ugly. But now everybody sees it because everybody's recording it, and they think, oh, that's terrible. No, that's how it's always looked. You've just never experienced it.
Right.
So, the thing is, like when the perfect example of people being naive was during the Civil War. They talked about war and gallantry and all this, and then suddenly guys like Matthew Brady started photographing the battle scenes and how ugly it was, and the citizens were aghast at all this terrible vision. Well, that's always been there. You've just never seen it before. And the same thing happened in the Vietnam War. A war is, the old Jimmy Stewart movies. No. War is what happens when the cameraman started recording the actual battles, and it's horrendous and it's violent, and people are just naive. And the first time they're exposed to it, they can't believe that because it doesn't look like, this violence you see doesn't look like what they showed on Adam 12. So that's the thing. But it's always been that way, and you're just seeing it because you don't live in that world. Thank God for you, and I have to live in that world. But some of us have to work in that world.
We're very fortunate to live in America, regardless of how we find a lot of problems here. So be it. But another argument I had with someone a couple months ago, he's like, oh, well, America, we're losing our right to speak and blah, 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 which I get. So what? Stand up for it, fight for it in the court of law. Don't go parading around with weapons. But then I asked the same guy, well, why don't you move to, I don't know, the Middle East and try to form an opinion on their government? Let's see how that works out. You can't, there's a lot of countries where you can't, even countries that are westernized, you really can't get away with saying some of the shit we say here. It's not possible.
Canada, you can go to jail for speech sometimes. And that's as close to the United States as far as the culture as many other countries.
Right.
But they don't have that freedom of speech along with a bunch of other rights. But that's the thing. People take it for granted because they live here. But like you said, go live somewhere else and see how you like it, and then come back and tell me how it is here. The best people you want to talk to are people that immigrated here from oppressive countries, like the Slavic areas or Russia, or, back in the USSR days, and ask them what they think of the United States. Because they're going to say, oh my God, yeah.
Fucking paradise.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I told you this before. When I was a kid, I was a punk, man. I hung out with shady people. I had issues with law enforcement when I was young. It wasn't until you grow up and you look back with hindsight, you're like, they're only doing what they're supposed to do to keep the quality of that community up to par. That's their only purpose. Right, yeah. And if you're going to act like a punk, well, then you're going to have to get treated like one. If you're respectful, on the other hand, like I was always...
Most people grow out of that, like you did. It's a phase when they're young, and they get, most of them don't go into really serious stuff. But
yeah,
I arrested a 13-year-old for murder before, right? So I mean, if you jump that big fence, then
Yeah, sometimes you cross that line, and then it takes, I don't know, like divine intervention to change you, right?
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, my God. Yeah.
I don't know. I look at the world today, especially this war in the Ukraine, which I still cannot wrap my head around it. I still have a hard time understanding why Russians and Americans don't like each other outside of the idea there they believe the authority is the all power. Here, a little different. But at the end of the day, we're human.
Right. It's if you talk to the average Russian citizen as opposed to the government, who spoke to an American citizen as opposed to the government, they probably get along just fine.
I agree. Yeah, I think what was it? I think the most devastating thing we did in this whole Ukrainian thing is we took McDonald's away, right?
Exactly. That'll show up.
At the street level, these people are like, wait, they just took McDonald's and Starbucks? What the f is going on?
For a Big Mac.
Yeah, because you remember how big a deal it was when McDonald's got there? It was enormous. There were lines that were wrapping around city blocks. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so we took it. I mean, and it seems to have some but we're not here. Obviously, we're not going to hear much about it. They're a very controlled state of being, which leads me circle back to law enforcement in America. Look, are there some faults? Sure. Can they be corrected? Absolutely. Is it worse than other places? No way. North Korea. Did you hear? I just learned this in North Korea when the former leader died. If you weren't crying hard enough, they would kill you.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Kim Jong-un. Yeah.
And then here we're worried about, well, I don't know. I want to form my opinion without any issue, and I want to be right about everything. Meanwhile, in other countries, you will be killed for your ideas.
Yeah, you will be. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, exactly, Cloyd.
Right. Take for granted the way they have it here.
So, Cloyd, for you, what are some cases from your past that stand out to you the most?
Oh, there's so many. It depends. There are certain ones that stand out for one reason here, and another one that stands out for a different reason. One of them, matter of fact, A&E called me. I may be doing an episode on this case. Was a murder of a girl named Shannon Harps. She was up on Capitol Hill in Seattle, which is kind of the yuppie area of town, and she got invited to a party, and it was like 7 o'clock in the evening, and she walked to a nearby store to get some stuff and was walking back to her apartment in a densely populated area, but not a high crime area. It's, like any densely populated areas, there's some crime, but she was walking back and somebody just started following her and she didn't realize it. And she entered her apartment building. She had a basement apartment. And on one side, there were stairs that went down to the door. And this person followed her down to the stairs and just stabbed her to death for no apparent reason, having picked her at random. So we got called out there. It was one of those things, like I said, you get there, we know who she was. We had no idea what happened. We had no idea who could have done this. One person said that there was a guy sitting on the steps of a building, which ironically was the Seattle Mental Health Building. It was closed at that hour. But he was drinking bottles of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer and he was flicking the caps into the street. So we looked and there's a bunch of Pabst Blue Ribbon caps in the street. Well, because she walked right by there. Maybe this is the guy. And we had the crime scene people, let's pick up all these caps and we'll have them analyzed later. In the meantime, about 6 blocks away, a patrol car was driving by a bus stop and saw a guy sitting in there drinking the Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. So he said, So he pulled in there, and him and his partner pulled in, and they stopped this guy and said, we got this guy stopped. He's drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon beer at this bus stop 6 blocks away. Maybe it's the guy. So there were a couple of people that the suspect had walked right by after he stabbed him. They were eyewitnesses. So we put them in a car and had him taken over. And they looked at this guy and they said, no, that's not the guy. And I, okay, that's not the guy. Well, then, so we found that out, and I said, you know, he was drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Maybe he's the same guy. Maybe that has nothing to do with the killer. Let's take him to the office, talk to him about it, and at least eliminate that as the lead. So they took him down to our office, and 45 minutes later, my partner and I went down there, and we talked to this guy, and he's telling us. First of all, he denies he was ever over by the apartment. He denies that he ever flicked any beer bottle or beer caps into the street, and was nowhere near that apartment. He said that somebody told him somebody got stabbed a few blocks away, and then a while later, a police canine dog came tracking by and said, "You better get back. The dog will bite you. Don't go near him." So he said, "Oh, that's not." So we're talking to him. He's obviously got mental issues. Not like absolutely crazy, but he's got mental issues. And so before I leave, I said, "Let me swab your cheek so I can," because I thought he was the guy that was flicking the bottle caps. Because what are the odds? Pabst Blue Ribbon. I mean, sure, it's a common beer, but in this area, it's certainly not even the top 5 brands that people will be drinking, not even the top 10. So I thought, I wonder why he's not telling us he was drinking the damn bottles. So long story short, I swabbed him and then we let him go. So the next day, I bring in one of those witnesses that saw the suspect walk by, and I have him hook him up with my forensic artist to do a composite sketch. And this lady I used, she was a civilian employee in the police department, and she was fabulous because I mean her drawings look like real people. They didn't look like zombies and stuff that some of the stuff you see on TV. So yeah, so I put her together with this guy, and it takes about 4 or 5 hours to do a composite sketch. And at the end, they come out with this sketch, and it's this young-looking guy with a thin face and a kind of a light beard, and he was wearing a stocking cap. And so I made that into a bulletin. I sent it out everywhere in Seattle, and I sent it statewide, looking for this guy as a person of interest in this homicide. Well, I get a call like an hour later from this guy who's a Department of Corrections guy, what used to be called a parole officer, now they call them community corrections officers. But he says, I have a guy on the caseload that looks exactly like that picture. And this corrections officer is one of the special units. They handle like extremely violent or mentally ill people. And he goes, yeah, this guy has real anger issues towards women and all this other stuff. And so I pull up his most recent booking photo from on my computer while I'm talking to this guy. And this guy could have posed the picture. It looks exactly like it, right? And so that guy says, well, he's in violation of his parole right now, or his what do you call it? Anyway, he's in violation, and there's a warrant out for his arrest. So great, cool. So I put out a thing. I want him arrested, and we have this fugitive task force that we use all the time. It's made of Seattle detectives and U.S. Marshals, and I call one of my buddies over there and said, I need you to look for this guy. No problem. He's out. Puts the dogs out. And that was like at 3 p.m. He calls me at like 7 p.m. We got the guy. We're bringing him down. Okay. So he brings him into our office, and we put him in one of the interview rooms. Of course, it has a one-way glass on the thing. We always put people in there, then we'll go around the other side and just watch them and see how they act. And he's sitting there, and one thing that I noticed, he had scratches on his nose and his cheek, relatively fresh scratches. Oh, that's interesting. So after a while, we go in there, and my partner and I, we start talking to this guy, and we're talking about what things, and the night of the murder. He never once says, what's this all about? He never once says, why are you talking to me? He just answers the questions. He admits being in the area of the murder when the murder happened. He admits seeing police cars and hiding from them. Well, why are you hiding from them? I don't know. I just don't like the police, And then all the way up, and then finally, this is like 2.5 hours into it. I said, his name was, what was his name? Oh, God dang it, I can't forget. I can't remember now. Anyway, I said, you've never even asked why we're here. Why you're here, what we're talking to you about. He goes, yeah, I was kind of wondering, just like that, And I go, Joe was his name. And I said, Joe, we're investigating a murder of a woman that happened up there where you were. Hey, oh, no. I have nothing to do with any murder. They just said it right away. Oh, nothing to do with any murder. Well, while he was there interviewing him, we had given him a can of pop and let him smoke cigarettes and all this stuff. So after it was done, we took him out and put him in jail for the DOC warrant. and I forgot to mention earlier, we'd found the knife nearby the scene and had it processed and found male DNA on the handle. So I took the cigarettes and the pop can and I put them in evidence and sent those down and had them analyzed for DNA to compare to the DNA off the knife handle. And we're going like that. A couple of days later, I get a call from the crime lab that says, Joseph is not your guy. The DNA doesn't match. I'm like, wow, that was just kind of blew me away because this guy's, he looks just like the sketch. He admits being up there. He goes through all these things that make him sound like the guy. As a matter of fact, when I was first talking to him, I'm thinking this is our guy. But when he started, he was so adamant when he said he didn't know anything about murder. Then I had some doubts because usually people that deny murder, they're nervous. They're not adamant. And he showed signs of truthfulness in my experience. So I didn't know if he was a guy or not. The DNA said he wasn't the guy. So back to square one. And so I started doing stuff. I put in the DNA for the guy that we stopped with the beer just to compare to the bottle caps. And I get a call a couple days later. He's your guy. What? His DNA is the DNA on the knife handle. And I thought, God, that's weird because the witnesses supposedly walked right by him and said it wasn't him. And then they produced a sketch that looks absolutely nothing like this guy, but happens to look like this other guy, but it's him. And so we get the horses. Well, first of all, we go charge him. We're going to go racing out to go find him because he lived in an apartment up on Capitol Hill. But luckily, we're vesting up and grabbing our guns. And just a second, and I checked, he's in jail. Unrelated thing, because I had that happen before. I run all over town looking for somebody, and he's been sitting in jail the whole time. So we go over and get this guy, and we do this interrogation with him. And it's, again, 4 or 5 hour interrogation. And he's kind of, first of all, we started asking about the stuff he told us that night. And he doesn't remember that. And he says different things. And that's because when you're lying, you make it up. And we ask you so many questions, you forget what you said later. Whereas if it's the truth, you can recount it over and over and over again and get most of the parts right. I mean, there might be some minor variations, but the truth, you can say, yeah, this is what happened. But he was saying, what? I don't know what that is, because he'd forgotten what he told us. And so I knew, and long story short, we kind of let the rapper out, and he eventually he confessed to the murder. And what happened was he was so, once he knew he was trapped, he got pretty emotional, and I will say it, an interrogation is like fishing. You put your bait out there and you get a nibble, and even if it bites, you let some out, because he would go off on these tangents. And I'd let it go, and then I'd start reeling him back. And then he'd go off on another tangent, and I'd let that go for a while and reel him back. It kind of wears him out, actually. And then finally at the end, he was staring at me, and I was right next to him, and our faces were 4 inches apart. And he was looking at me in the eyes, and I could see he was getting emotional. I said, this guy was a whack job psycho. I mean, but I said, his name was James. I said, James, if you want to cry, that's okay. And he started bawling. And of course, once they cried, then you got him. And it just took about 21 minutes. I got a complete confession. He described following her down. He said he just snapped and saw her and followed her down there. And I said, what did, when you grabbed her, did she say anything? And he was talking real softly. He said, he told me to get off her. And I said, what did you say? I said, just die, bitch. And I stabbed the shit out of her. That's what he said. And then that was it. Well, so ironically, the twist at the end of this case, so this Joseph guy, the guy we originally brought in that looked exactly like the sketch, ends up, he and James Williams, who was the real killer, only lived a block apart. And later I got to thinking, I'll bet you they were up there together. James did the murder, and Joe didn't. Maybe wasn't even right there when it happened, but because he just it's so much exactly. Well, anyway, 6 weeks later, I get called to a murder in an area of Seattle called Greenwood up in the north end, and I get up there, and it's some guy's been stabbed. He's gone. The medics have taken him to Harborview, which is a trauma center. So we're there. I'm there with my partner. It's 2:00 in the morning. There's not much evidence there. I'm going to go to Harborview and look at this guy. So I get in my car and I drive to the hospital, which is more close to downtown. And I walk in, and which room's that guy? Oh, he's in that room over there. So I go in there, and there's a body on the table with a sheet of, I pull it back, and it's Joseph, the guy I originally arrested.
Wow.
Yeah, it was him. He was dead. And we later got that guy. the guy that did it, and he was crying. He goes, "I didn't even know that guy." He says, "We were just talking. All of a sudden, he started beating me with a stick, and I just swung a knife around. I didn't even know if I hit him." And he did it self-defense, and so we knew this guy was a violent guy, Joseph. So finally, we just said he wasn't charged. That guy wasn't charged with the death. It's a lawful self-defense case. So that was an interesting case.
Yeah, I mean, so Joseph and James clearly knew each other, no doubt.
Yeah.
And
they were both under DOC supervision. They lived within a block of each other. And again, it's a pretty densely populated neighborhood. In that block, there's probably 8,000 residents, maybe not, maybe closer to 5,000. But anyway, in the 2 blocks. So, I mean, is it possible they didn't know each other? Absolutely. But there's just too many coincidences. They live that close together. They're both on DOC. He looks exactly like the sketch that these people did, because he probably is the guy that walked past them. Because the other guy, the guy that actually homicide, didn't look anything like, not even remotely like. First of all, he's tall with a bald head. This guy's young with a thin face and a beard. And so it was really weird.
It's strange because it sounds to me like they were drinking together. The girl appeared. They're both on edge, drunk. And
Right.
No matter who you are, good or bad, your decision making when you're inebriated is not the best.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So
yeah.
It sounded like something like maybe. I mean, if I had to guess, they're sitting there talking about this girl. They see her, and it got increasingly worse at the mental level, and that's what transpired. Right? They probably said something to her.
If you're mentally ill and you drink, it aggravates. Right.
Yeah. I mean, what scares me? I saw an interview with this guy. I forget what show it was, but he was in prison. He was a murderer. And he says that some of the people, like he said, he killed a woman. And he said that the woman was like making fun of him. It turned out it was all in his head.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. That's his projecting, and also his psychological justification for committing this crime. And, like this girl, I'm sure she didn't even glance at this guy or these guys as she walked past.
Right.
But they just, he or they jumped in behind her, followed her, and ended up stabbing her to death.
Yeah.
For no reason at all.
Yeah. Probably because a little voice in his head's like, "Oh, you're going to ignore me? Is that what you're going to do?" I mean, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, that guy ended up pleading guilty against the advice of his attorneys at trial, because he just gotten out of prison. He shot somebody. That's why he was in prison. And it was a long story, but yeah, those are weird cases.
Yeah, I mean, like those are the
things that became homicide detective to work though, because it was a puzzle, right? It was.
Right. Now, again, to refresh, they send someone vetted like you to go investigate versus the auditor guy who works at a restaurant.
Right. Well, he has no skills. Yeah.
I'd like to see.
No idea, no concept of what you have to do.
Right.
No training. Well, like a lot of these guys that they put on these review panels have absolutely no training in police work or any thing of it, have no idea other tand what they watch on TV, and yet they're going to judge.
Right.
I should be on the American Medical Association board because I watch ER and stuff. I should be able to.
Yeah. I watch enough cooking shows. I'm pretty much a chef.
Yeah, that's right. Bring that. What's that guy's name? I can't think of the name. The English guy who was always so foul. Bring him. Oh, Gordon Ramsay. Bring Gordon Ramsay. I'll tell him how to cook.
Yeah.
Wow. I
Wow.
watch cooking shows on TV.
I can never work for that guy. That guy's crazy. But I'd love to bring these people. I want to defund the police. All right, fine. You want to defund the police? Well, here's some murder cases you need to go solve. See how that works out.
And tell the family why you can't.
Right, exactly. I mean, they don't.
Tell the family why it's not going to happen. Yeah.
That's what people don't realize. To be in law enforcement, it takes a lot. You're not talking about just getting out there, policing the streets. You're dealing with broken-hearted families. You're dealing with scenes that would otherwise stain your mind forever. It's not as cut and dry as people make it sound, and that's what. And so, and then another, I have a recording I'll share with you, because I don't have this gentleman's permission to share his recording publicly, but I did record the conversation. And, this is some months ago. And he's like, yeah, well, I was expressing about what my beliefs are in defund the police. He's a pro defund person. So I told him, there's cases right now on the West Coast where people are robbing stores and they're getting away with it because the cops can't get involved. They're not enough staff. There's all this bullshit in the press where they're trying to give them a bad rap. And he's like, well, we could take, the people could take care of it. I'm like, oh, okay. So you and the Southern Justice League are going to go there, right? And you're going to watch those towns for 7 days a week, all year long? You have families. You can't afford to do that. It takes a network. It takes a government. It takes structure and communication to help these communities. Not six guys in pickup trucks with shotguns. You're going to end up dead. Right. So, I don't know. You know, another big one, Cloyd, are these the unsolved cases. And one of the ones in particular, I reached out to Norman it's Pardo, I believe. I saw a documentary with him about O.J. Simpson. And I got to tell you, man, when I first watched that, I had an opinion about the O.J. thing all along. In the back of my mind, I thought his son Jason might have did it. But I watched this guy's documentary, and I was, for one, I didn't really know the real details of that case. It was pretty fucking gruesome. That was not...
Oh, very gruesome. I've been to that scene. I've been to the condo, and I've also... A friend of mine was one of the DNA prosecutors on that case. And, I mean, they had... That district attorney's office had to look far and wide to find a jury that would find him not guilty. They had to work at it because, I mean, it was so clear.
I mean, because everything about that.
The judge was letting stuff in he should have never let in because he was starstruck. And it was a disaster from the beginning. It was a disaster.
Agreed. Like, did you see that? It's a documentary, Who Killed Nicole? It's on, I mean, you can find it on YouTube. I found it on YouTube. And by the time I was done with that, my entire train of thought about that case has been altered. So,
people don't realize there's so much evidence that wasn't even presented. And I don't know why.
It was suppressed.
Why, like in OJ's bathroom in his house, the box that this knife came from was open on his bathroom vanity. And the knife wasn't there, obviously, but the knife that matched the murder weapon, it was from his bedroom. And all this other stuff. And, I broke my hand when I broke a glass. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, his name is Norman Pardo, and he has that documentary. And the amount of facts there were things like suppressed, like statements from other people that were in the know, and they suppressed this information. And I can't seem to understand why. The only conclusion I came to, because that's 2 years after the riots for the Rodney King thing. They don't want to convict OJ, could start incite another race thing, whatever the case may be. But God, everything about that, and then top it off, OJ or somehow this serial killer is right in the center of all this. He's hanging around Nicole Simpson. He actually knows. There's I guess phone records sealed. Another thing sealed. The relationship between OJ and the serial killer. I don't know what to think of this anymore. Why is this not spoken about more publicly? Even in this guy's documentary, after watching it, I feel like more people should have watched that. It blows my mind, man. So for you, was there any of those cases for you where it was unsolved and it just haunted you long term?
Well, fortunately, I didn't have a ton of unsolved cases. One of them that kind of bugs me is not that it's unsolved, because we've known from the beginning who did it, but there were just not enough that the prosecutor would charge it. And this was a stupid, like murder over nothing type case. A lot of those are that way. People kill people for no stupid ass reason. But so this one happened 3 years after Hurricane Katrina happened. And this guy, he lived in New Orleans, but he moved out here because of Katrina, and he wanted, with his family, moved to Seattle, got a little house. He was working as a bus driver, doing a good job. His wife was working somewhere. He had a couple of young kids, and so it was a nice summer evening. And he was on his front porch because a buddy of his from New Orleans had flown up and had was sitting on the front porch having a beer at like 1:30 in the morning. And there's these two cars in the street. He lives on this curve in an area called Beacon Hill, and there's a curve of this street. And these two cars stop in the middle of the street, and they're yelling at each other. And it's like, because they got in some kind of road rage incident, right? And so he sees this, and he goes out there and he goes, "Hey, you guys, why don't you pull in my driveway here, because you're going to get hit. That's a dangerous curve." And one of the guys just looks at him, pulls out a gun, and blasts him 4 times in the chest.
Wow.
Kills him just right there. And for nothing, right in front of his family, and for his friends. His family, his kids were asleep, thank God. Anyway, this guy's in that Cadillac Escalade, and he takes off. Right. And then there's all this stuff. We get there. Well, this Escalade is found about 3/4 of a mile away the next morning in this area, dumped. And so we get the car, and this guy who owns it, he's not a gangbanger, he's not a thug, he's actually an installer for DirecTV, but he was one of those go to clubs and play the gang life when I'm on my off time, but have a job. And he reports it's stolen. And his story, he had been in a nightclub downtown. We knew that. His story was that he came home from the nightclub and parked his car in his driveway, and which was, 15, 17 miles from the murder scene. And he must have dropped his key. First he just said somebody stole the car. And we bring him in, and he goes, well, he lives, how did they steal the car? He lives on this dead-end street that you have to walk all the way down, and there'd be no reason to be there. There's not going to be people just passing by. And he goes, well, how did they start it? Oh, they had the keys. I must have dropped them in the driveway. So you're telling me that this guy, some guy comes on this dark street in the middle of the night and just walks up your driveway in the absolute dark and finds your keys laying there and steals your Cadillac, right? Yeah. And so anyway, that was his story. We brought him in 2 or 3 times. Matter of fact, the one time we brought him in, he told his wife, tell the kids I'm not going to be back for a long, long time. But the problem is, we thought the people in the other car were Vietnamese and didn't speak very good English. And we finally figured out who they were, and we started bringing them in and interviewing them. And one after the other, that one of them says, I recognize one of the other people in the front car, not the shooter, but one of the persons in the car, because it says, oh, his husband works at a Safeway store, and blah, 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 blah. And so, her husband, I mean. So we go and we get this guy or this woman and bring her in, and she said, oh, no, that's not me. I wasn't in that car. And everybody's lying. And so it's just like, nobody will tell the truth. And we didn't have enough. There's shell casings. We just didn't quite have enough to do it. And everybody, both cars were all lying. Everybody lied, and they didn't even know each other. They just were all lying. Yeah. So
that's just people. They don't want the lie. They don't want to be liable. They don't want the issue.
That's exactly right. And so the sad thing about that case is he had elderly parents that lived in Louisiana, and they would call me all the time and say, yeah, we want to find out what happened to our son. I said, I know what happened to your son. I know who did it, but I can't. They'd call me all the time, and sometimes just to talk. And they were in their 80s back then. They're probably passed away by now. And just so sad because their son was taken for no reason, and there was just we were that one little hair short where the prosecutor would charge. We had all this other stuff, a lot of circumstantial evidence, but and his story was absolute BS. And so this guy was so nervous, he actually had picked up and moved to Texas. I know that because I got a call a year later from some sheriff, Billy Bob, down in Texas, since this guy came in and wanted a concealed weapons permit. And he said he ran his name and said, I was arrested for murder in Seattle. And he goes, you want me to go get that boy? I said, no, don't do that right now. But I know where he is. But I mean, that case is still open. There's still stuff going on, and hopefully they'll solve it. And, clear it and get it arrested. But it was frustrating to know who did it, know everything about it, but nobody would tell the truth, even though they didn't know the other person. They just lied about everything.
It's just it's sad that you don't there's a family out there that wants closure.
Yeah, and this kid, the guy,
it's crazy. I don't know,
kid,
I think people
30 years old, absolutely innocent, 100% innocent, not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's just basically, it was actually warning someone to stay on the road so they don't get harmed. That's crazy.
Exactly. He's trying to pull into my driveway, get out of the street so you don't get hit. Yeah, exactly.
And they get shot for yeah, man. I mean, it's terrible.
No reason at all. And this guy, this
Cloyd, I think you broke up a little bit there. Yeah, you did.
He had this guy like us, and he loved that car. And we did search for his house. He had pictures of our wife. Yeah. My thing just came out that your internet is unstable, but now you're back.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah.
Okay, so anyhow, moving forward from that, one of the other big topics that have been coming out lately is shortages for law enforcement, for individuals to join law enforcement. That's becoming a pressing issue.
Yeah, because if you second guess everybody and threaten them, they're not going to work for you, and you're not going to find anybody qualified that'll come in and take their spot. You might find people, but there'll be much less quality candidates than the people you had. And that's another thing about this one. Like I said, if you tell people you having no idea anything about what's going on, you tell people how they have to do their job and threaten them with things like jail if they don't, they'll just say, well, I'll do something else. And bye-bye. Or they'll go to an area where the people don't feel that way. And that's what happened in Seattle. As I'm down, the Seattle Police Department today is at about 50% of what it should be as far as staff.
Yeah, that scares me, man, because if that trend continues, we're going to have a problem, especially now with these. When I turn on the news and I see mass shootings over the span of one weekend, and then another one in Brooklyn just days prior, something's up. And a lot of that is because, and I'll tell you what I think personally, and I'm not saying that this is for what's going on, but I'm seeing things like rent go through the roof, and then and then I'm seeing gas go through the roof, food's getting more expensive, and wages are staying the same. So I wonder if there's a breaking point for people, because here in Florida,
except for these people that are doing this are not people that were, Cub Scout leaders last week and doing stuff and having a family.
Yeah,
great. These are most of these people have a long history of criminal activity.
Right, and then it takes that little thing to say that's it. That was the final straw. That's right, should scare people, and then what? Have less police? That's insanity. That's a crazy idea.
You know what else is insane? This mass shooting in South Carolina last week, where a guy went in the mall and shot like 7 people. They let him out on $25,000 bail. That is insane.
What?
That's the judges. That's the people. They're just as responsible. Not all judges. There are a lot of very good judges out there, but these ones that think nobody should stay in jail. This guy shot 7 people in a mall. What are you going to do next week when he goes out and shoots somebody else? I mean, who's going to be liable for that?
Honestly, this guy elected to get a weapon and go do mass harm, and they let him out on bail.
Yeah, it's $25,000 bail, but he's on home detention. Oh, that'll show.
Yeah. Oh no, not that.
At some point, you have to protect society at large from the potential of violence of these people. And this person, I don't know much about this guy, but I guarantee you, if you look at his history, you can see this coming. But there's going to be prior. This isn't his first act of violence. Well, first of all, even if it is your first act of violence, if you elect to go shoot 7 people, sorry. I'll give you $500,000 bail for each victim, right?
Right.
Because it's like, you might as well shot 10 more because there's no other penalty. I mean, who knows? You still have to be tried, but it's insane because you're not protecting other people. The potential that he'll go out and kill other people, or shoot other people, harm other people, rob other people, when he's shown that he's had violence. It's ridiculous. That's one of the things they have to consider in bail is the dangerousness of the person. I mean, if the guy is not a dangerous guy, he wouldn't have done that crime. And I'm fine for putting giving low bail for nonviolent offenders, but not for violent offenders.
I get it, man. Like, look, the guy, it wasn't like he was like selling weed or some shit, man. This guy, this isn't heated of passion either. That is premeditated. He went there to open fire.
He had to go to the mall. He had to walk in and decide to shoot the first one. If for some miracle that first one wasn't premeditated, every other one after that is. Because you've already established how you have intent. So yeah.
That's insanity. I mean, these are things that should frighten people, and this is a prime example of you can't defund the police. You have to increase funds. They need to be able to handle shit like this. And definitely don't let him out of jail. What?
Yeah, no kidding. Or on home detention.
Yeah, this guy's his punishment is currently this. He has to watch TV at home. Damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know,
man.
man.
Watch TV in jail. At least then he won't be able to do anything to anybody.
Right? Yeah, you can't stream it. You can't pick what you want to see. Your meals aren't going to be there's got to be some sort of punishment for shit like that, man. I mean, it can't be that. That's not a good message to convey.
But even so, you have to protect society at large from the potential that this guy's going to do something like that again, and he's shown that potential.
Yeah, I agree, man. And then you watch the pattern. It starts up in North in New York, then it gets down to the Carolinas, and then soon, I hate to say it.
It's South Carolina. It's not some hard left-wing area, but apparently the judge is that. I don't know what the deal is with the judge down there, but yeah, you're going to that's the judge's decision, to let these people out. You can set a reasonable bail. Although when you shoot 7 people, I'm sorry, that could be no bail because you're just too dangerous.
Right.
You're shooting people in a mall. It's not like you got in a fight with somebody. that or whatever. But
I mean, Florida's a lot of things, but I promise you, if that happened in Florida, that guy's not getting out. There is no bail.
Oh, he's not getting out.
Yeah. Period. End of story.
Well,
you're indoors.
In that case, he didn't kill anybody, but still, it doesn't matter if you're one of those people that got hit or their family. It doesn't matter. You're thankful that he didn't die. Yeah, I don't know if some feel critical or anything, but he didn't kill anybody, so I understand that. But he shot 7 people. He could have killed all 7. He could have killed other innocent people who he wasn't shooting at because those bullets are going downrange in a crowded mall. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Imagine realistically, some or most of those victims weren't people he was trying to shoot. They just were in the mall and got hit by rounds. And so, but it doesn't matter as far as intent, because if you shoot somebody and miss and hit somebody else, that's called transferred intent. It's just like you intended to shoot the victim that did get hit. So it doesn't matter.
I mean, even if you walked in a mall and slapped 9 people, you should go to jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be that simple. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if I did what Will Smith did publicly, I'd be in jail. That's assault.
You would have gotten charged anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
no question about it. No question about it.
I don't know, man. It's scary business these days, man. And again, that's why I don't want to tell you to come out of retirement. They need more people like you out there that's going to solve these things and be, police walk, and I say this a lot, they walk into fire every day.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know, man. Well, Cloyd, before we wrap up, I want to ask you one other question.
All right.
Is there any idea of you perhaps maybe, I don't know, maybe make a book about your life from start to finish?
Well, I already did write a book about my career in homicide.
Right.
It's out there. Yeah.
That I know, but I mean more like so people.
People don't care about what I did as a high school and
Well, you'd be surprised, man. Like some people gotta have a relate. They gotta relate to I want to be like Cloyd.
Right, yeah.
I'd spoken to.
I'm writing stuff all the time, but we'll see. But mostly I don't have any plans to write anything like a true autobiography or anything like that. Other than I'm writing about cases, and
right.
A couple of things I'm writing about now are not my cases, but they're cases that I know people that worked on them, or they were around me, or they're notorious cases or things like that. So, I mean, but the thing about it's just there's so much, all these old cases, you've never heard of so many 30, 40, 50-year-old cases being solved because of advances in forensic technology. And that's a good thing and interesting, and a lot of stuff's coming up with that. And so those are the type of things I'm writing about.
Yeah, that's an important. I just saw this thing on TV where they were. I forget the name of the show now. Where they dive to sites and they find cars, and it's people have passed.
Oh, yeah.
Or I see that stuff all the time. I think it's great. I mean, there's another guy I'd spoken to in a podcast. His name is Jared Bradley. And
I know Jared.
Yeah. I mean, he's got that vac. I mean, things like that. They're important. Things like that are important, right?
Yeah. Oh, the MVAC is a huge development in forensic DNA collection and analysis. It's moved the board way forward on that.
Yeah, I'm going to be speaking to him again. I'm going to be reaching out to him because, I firmly believe in people inventing things like that. We need more of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've known Jared for 7, 8 years. Matter of fact, he was up here a couple months ago. We went for lunch. But yeah, no, he's he's really into it now, and he's traveling all over the world getting this thing going, and it's been. I have a lot of good things to say about the MVAC system and all that. So you can get DNA off things you could never get DNA off before, And I think the FBI did an analysis of it, and that's the one thing the FBI is okay with doing analysis.
Yeah.
They said that I think it was, what was the number? 2,700 times more sensitive than swabbing or sniffing the old way we used to do it. They still do it sometimes. 2,700%. I mean, come on.
Damn,
I don't know if that's the exact number, but it's something that.
Yeah, but that's a game changer, man. That's a big deal.
Oh man, it is a game changer. That's why these cases are being solved left and right using that technology, and then genealogy and all that stuff. When you want to know about Murder, She Wrote, the little old lady solving murders.
Oh yeah, I remember that show.
Genealogy, because those are. I've met some. They're little old ladies that just have to with their charts and work on those things, in their office or home, and they're the ones that are, and they're helping, solve these crimes.
Well, that's why I'm going to find someone that works in cold case specifically, or even if you want to do it, come on a show and talk about some cold cases that, they're just really that cold, because these online sleuths, these at-home detectives, these ladies, some of these little old ladies or men that are at home, they figure shit out. They have that kind of puzzle pattern mind. And
the problem you have to have with that is you have to have access to the evidence to actually get a charge. And so, where you can order certain tests and things like that. And then you have to actually go out and talk to your witnesses and people and eventually the suspect if he's still alive.
Agreed. Yeah, but sometimes it's just like it could be that one time where you speak about it. It's on a podcast. It happened in such and such area, and so and so is listening to it, and it's been years. He's like, you know what, man, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm going to speak.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that that's even before all this advances in forensics. When I was talking about the cold cases, go out and talk to those witnesses before that weren't cooperative, because they were buddies with the suspect then, but they may not have seen him now for 30 years. And they've grown up and matured, have families of their own. And a lot of times you'll hear, I was wondering if you were going to come talk to me again. And so, there you go. And so, I have a couple of friends that are still active in cold cases. One of them up in Snohomish County, which is 30 miles north of Seattle. He's done a couple of big ones. That, he was the first, one of his cases was the first one where they used, it was solved with genealogy that went to trial. And then a couple of he's kind of semi-retired, but still does that, and he's kind of a lot of stuff going on.
I mean, you'll have to connect with that guy, because that's got my interest big time. Because there's things I've read. There's things I know about, case I know about here in Florida that it happened in the Tampa Bay area that's been unsolved, and I knew that person, and I was 15 when that took place. Yeah, nothing ever came of it, or at least that I know of.
There's tens of thousands of those cases around the country, So believe me, I know I hear from not all of them, but a lot of them.
It's insane.
But that's the thing. But you know what? All it takes is that all that case is sitting on a case file somewhere or a shelf, and that evidence is probably sitting in a locker somewhere, and somebody just got to get off their butt, go out there and open it, and start working all over again. And they're not. That's all these cases you hear about that are getting solved. That's exactly what happened. Somebody just said, we should look at that case again. Open up, start working the case, and boom, there it was. Because like I said, forensic science has made more advances in the last 2 years than the previous 20. So that's the thing. You just gotta get off your butt. The problem is these guys are all busy doing new cases, right?
Yeah.
They don't have I tried working cold cases on my spare time back in the old days. You don't have any spare time, so you can get some stuff done. It's not easy.
Yeah, for those people that want to defund the police, you're basically saying, well, the old cases are too bad, right? It's unfortunate. Yeah. It takes a lot, because peace of mind is peace of mind, whether it be at the moment or years later. It's still peace of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, in any regard, Cloyd, it's been great. I'm going to talk to Cloyd in post for everyone listening, so we're going to say good day. Cloyd, thank you again for coming on.
Sure thing.
And we'll talk soon.
Okay.